Well, Kamala remains a contender, incredibly, for 2028. And on the other side, we've got JD Vance. He continues to impress the Republican base, and that Republican base is now the MAGA base. Listen to this chant for the vice president.
Not even halfway done. So here's I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds awesome. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, ladies and gentlemen.
Are they right, Josh? Is he 48? Does anyone have a realistic hope of unseating him as the next Republican presidential candidate?
Well, as of right now, Rita, I think that he is the extremely early, extremely preliminary front runner, but it's very, very, very far from a shoe. And I actually was just looking at some recent polling data for the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, and the one poll that I saw from NBC News had his approval rating currently at 39%, 45% disapprove. That's still a lot of folks who neither approve nor disapprove. They probably don't have an opinion one way or the other, but he is, under 40% on the approval. So I think it's very far from a shoo-in. He certainly is very popular, I think, with large swaths of the MAGA base, but I think it's going to be a competitive primary for what it's worth. I think that at least one, possibly other current Trump cabinet members will probably enter the fray. Marco Rubio is the name that is most often mentioned. I would not be surprised, frankly, to see someone else, maybe even a Pete Hegseth, a Scott Bessent. I mean, I would not be surprised to see some former governors, some current senators. Maybe it's a Ron DeSantis, a Ted Cruz. I don't know what it is, but I don't think that JD Vance is going to skate this thing through. I think it's actually going to be a very competitive primary there. There's a lot of time left, right? I mean, this administration's barely started. We're less than 1 year into this 4-year administration there. So the vice president has a lot of time to leave a lasting impression on the voters when it comes to domestic policy, when it comes to foreign policy there. I would like to see him really kind of hone in on certain areas there. He should pick, I think, in my judgment, he should pick a couple of issues to really make his issue, own that issue, and show to the American people how you can lead the way on one issue as a precursor of how you can then lead the country more generally on all the issues.
Well, you know what? I'm going to go early. I think I'm going to go and put a sizable bet on him because, to me, he's the perfect politician. And thus far as VP, he hasn't put a foot wrong. But as you said, it's early days. We're not even a year into this administration. Now, we've got to talk about something that should be getting a lot more coverage around the world, and that's the slaughter of Christians continuing in Nigeria and other parts of Africa. The images, the videos of the slaughter are harrowing, horrific, too horrific to put to air. President Donald Trump has announced he is designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern. He wrote, Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands of Christians are being killed. Radical Islamists are responsible for this mass slaughter. I am hereby making Nigeria a country of particular concern. Josh, the president emphasised that action must be taken, but what will that action look like?
Well, that remains to be seen. I think that's very much a question that the American people are currently curious about. Rita, for what it's worth, personally, I've been following the story for many, many years now. Boko Haram is one of the world's most brutal Islamic terrorist organizations. They are just as brutal as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, you name it. And they control large swaths. They have effective day-to-day territorial control of maybe not large swaths of Nigeria, but decent swaths of the country. And it's a massive, massive problem for the beleaguered and besieged Christian population in those areas. There have been anti-Christian pogroms. There have been massacres. By the way, Nigeria is actually far from the only country in Africa that has this horrific concern.
Oh, yes.
In Egypt, which in theory is a major American ally, there have been all sorts of horrific slaughters of the local native Coptic Christians over the past 5, 10, 15 years. And then further down the African continent, you have the Congo, Rwanda. There was a horrific slaughter of Christians in the Congo a few months back. I actually remember talking about it with Charlie Kirk before he passed away. Terrible, terrible stuff. This happens all too often, frankly, on the African continent. Nigeria is interesting because Nigeria, of all the African countries, actually has one of the more advanced economies. So in theory, this should not be happening. It shouldn't be happening anywhere, to be clear, but it definitely should not be happening in a country in Africa that is slightly more purportedly developed like Nigeria. I mean, look, I don't think that the American people want boots to go in the ground or anything like that there, but surely there are at least some leverage tools that we can do when it comes to diplomacy and trade policy, tariffs, things like that, trying to make sure that the government actually gets a monopoly on the use of force over Boko Haram, the radical Islamist terrorist organization.
You mentioned a number of countries there, and Sudan also is just seeing
Yes.
mass slaughter of innocent people, a real genocide, absolutely horrific images coming out of Sudan as well. But on Nigeria, let's hear a cry for help from a Christian in Nigeria.
America, please stand for us. We are dying. America, save our life. Yesterday, one of my colleagues, Reverend, was slaughtered with his wife and his children.
Josh, some of the vision we've seen is among the most horrific savagery you can imagine. Mothers holding their terrified children, begging for mercy, and all of them killed, people buried alive, hacked to death, beheaded, hanged from trees, just savagery that is subhuman. Why isn't every world leader speaking out about this? The UN, the Pope, with this Christian slaughter. Why isn't this top of mind for the international community?
Well, it probably should be, right? But there are two things that come to mind. One is that thinking about foreign policy doctrines more generally, and thinking from an American perspective, Rita, the whole MAGA, America First, nationalist foreign policy doctrine is one that is not based in humanitarian concerns. It is not the foreign policy of Barack Obama when he intervened in Libya to topple Muammar Gaddafi to save the native population. It's not the foreign policy, of course, of George W. Bush and the neoconservatives either. It is a very realist national interest, pinpick strike, go in, bomb the crap out of them and get the heck out kind of foreign policy. So humanitarian concerns, while they genuinely tear at the heartstrings, it is not front and center, I think, of how the median Trump voter or how the median MAGA Republican necessarily thinks of foreign policy. But the other reason that comes to mind, Rhea, especially when we're talking here about humanitarian concerns, when we're talking about slaughters, accusations, whether they're real or perceived, of genocide there, is that, as the popular saying on social media goes, no Jews, no news. I mean, I think a lot of the folks that really should be outraged, that they should be outraged over the horrific slaughter of Christians by Boko Haram, I think are simultaneously too busy. They've been too busy just accusing Israel of committing genocide for the past 2 years there. So there's definitely some truth to that as well. But, putting on my proverbial MAGA hat, thinking as a Donald Trump voter myself, I think that a lot of folks here just don't think about foreign policy in ultra humanitarian terms. But I mean, these videos just genuinely just break your heart, and something surely has to be done in some capacity in some way.
Well, let's hear from a man who survived the Islamists. He survived Boko Haram, and he had this to say about life as a Christian in Nigeria.
I want to thank and applaud the United States of American President Donald Trump for designating Nigeria as a CPC, because this is one of the things that we have always wanted. Nigeria is the worst place to be as a Christian, like the worst place in the whole of the world to be as a Christian, because we wake up every day with news of killings, every day with news of massacring of Christians. It's totally a genocide that is happening here in Nigeria.
Josh, as you just explained, Americans don't want to be involved in forever foreign wars or wars without clear objectives. And MAGA is about America first, but we are talking here about Christians being slaughtered for being Christian. No. Do you think there would be support for some sort of military action by the US in this particular case?
I think that Donald Trump could probably sell it if he were to build the political capital and kind of sell it as some sort of limited operation. I guess the obvious question is, what kind of limited operation would that be? I mean, let's think back to the Iran strikes back in June. That was literally a 37-hour affair from when the B-2 bombers left Missouri, flew half around the world to Iran, flew back. The whole thing took, literally less than 2 days. So I'm not sure exactly what that would look like here. I'm a little skeptical that anything along those lines could be done. Here's what I will say. I mentioned earlier, you have the possibility of sanctions, the international diplomacy, tariff policy, all the tools of diplomatic and economic statecraft I think can and should be applied to the Nigerian government to get their freaking act together and to send Boko Haram packing to the pits of hell, frankly, there. Another thing that I think can probably should be done, and this might be controversial actually within kind of the MAGA base, is, a lot of Republicans are very skeptical when it comes to refugee and asylum policy, and rightfully so, to be clear, because it has been systemically incredibly abused for decades and decades here in the U.S. All sorts of fraudulent kind of economic asylum seekers and so forth there. But there are cases of legitimate asylum. There absolutely are cases of legitimate refugees. The Trump administration has gone above and beyond to try and make sure that the white Afrikaners down in South Africa, who are literally being oppressed by the anti-white racist government in South Africa, they've made sure that those folks know that they potentially have a home if they want to come to the U.S. there. So too, I think, should Christians literally getting slaughtered by Boko Haram in Nigeria. In my opinion, they should be absolutely eligible if they are on the cusp of being slaughtered. In my mind, Rita, putting on my immigration law hat, that means any definition of asylum refugee status under U.S. immigration law.
Well, yeah, that is a genuine asylum seeker, certainly not an economic migrant in what we're seeing there. Now, before you go, a left-wing podcaster, Kyle Kalinske, is being denounced online on social media. He is copying it for posting a meme that depicted Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica, as and I quote, fake grieving widow grifter. And he is not alone here, Josh. He's among thousands online on social media who are attacking Erica for everything from her choice of clothing to how she hugs people. It's all rather sick. Where do you think this is coming from, Josh? This fervour to attack a grieving widow?
Well, I think it's pretty simple, Rita, is they hate Charlie. They hate Charlie Kirk. They hate what he stood for. They hate what he built. They hate the organization that he built. They hate the movement that he led. They hate everything about him. And, by vicarious extension, they therefore hate his grieving widow as well. By the way, I mean, Erica Kirk has been thrust into the national spotlight. She was named the CEO and chairman of Turning Point USA. I believe it's also a matter of public knowledge that Erica Kirk's mother is also in very poor health. So in addition to just losing the love of her life, her husband and the father of her two young children, her mother's in poor health. I mean, just leave the freaking woman alone. I mean, my God. I mean, what at some point, like literally, what is wrong with you? I mean, there is such a deranged level of inhumanity and just lack of compassion for our fellow human beings that I think has taken hold of so many people on the left, Rita, here. The polls that I see day in and day out these days are just absolutely disgusting. The percentage of Democrats or self-described left-wingers who support some form of political violence, who say that shouting down or physically harming speakers to prevent them from speaking might be necessary, whether it's this with Erica Kirk, it's disgusting. It is literally disgusting. And it's no accident that you have, therefore, people on the right who are saying, do I really have enough in common with these people where they are my fellow countrymen? And not to put too fine a point on it, but when you start to ask those kind of questions, Rita, you have a citizenry and a polity and therefore a country that is at the brink of collapse there. So I really hope this does not go any further, because this stuff has the potential to tear the country apart to a very, very dark and bad place.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.